Gonna start off with a pro gamer move here, max difficulty, because I'm an expert at survival horror. Wait, survival horror? Gloomwood is a stealth game with great early reviews, so it's time to see whether it lives up to the hype. Now before you get out your pitchforks, let's talk about early access reviews. If it's released, it's subject to review. But Ember, it's early access, things can change. Objection.
있습니다.
The developer receives competitive benefits for early access, but for the consumer, it is a low-trust system and consumers cannot judge the value of their money on content that may or may not be released. Got it? Go. The standout feature of Gloomwood is how it handles immersion. With these graphics though, yes, immersion has little to do with graphical fidelity and everything to do with how information is communicated and the tools with which the player can interact with. The UI is entirely handled in-game in real time. Stealth indicators are located on your ring and in enemy eyes. Inventory and maps are pulled up with in-game objects. It's a small design choice, but it helps keep the pace of the game focused in real time while communicating all of the important information. The interactivity is also high. Objects can be moved to create platforms, bottles can be thrown for distractions, but most importantly you have vaulting, which allows pulling up onto any ledge, allowing for a lot of player-driven exploration. Exploration is another significant aspect of the game that is handled well in some ways, but poorly in others. The opening area, the fishery, showcases what level design can do for this game. It is a tutorial area, so there is a straight path introducing the mechanics of the game, but there are also some side paths to change up your approach. But if you have the mechanics learned, there's a ton of vertical movement allowing for sequence breaking the intended tutorial route. This is the key to satisfying exploration in Gloomwood. The payoff is the player's creative expression of how they traverse their environment to complete objectives. However, the level design that enables this is quickly lost as the game progresses. The levels become much more open, losing the vertical element and becoming much more linear. There are a number of optional buildings in the open areas, but since they're unintuitively much more dangerous than open spaces, and the player's only true objective is to progress beyond enemies, it becomes natural to avoid these optional buildings. If the player does choose to explore them, there isn't much payoff since they're usually just small areas and limited items like bullets aren't very useful if you do find them. These areas just feel uninspired compared to the sandbox-like design of the fishery. This brings us to stealth. The player hides in darkness to avoid sight and silences their footsteps at the cost of speed to avoid sound. When behind an enemy, the player can one-hit kill them. These are directly tied to the mechanics and the placement of the enemy. Enemy detection range is very small, so enclosed spaces are where they're threatening. Many do not patrol, but the ones that do tend to be in larger spaces to somewhat counteract this. So what threat do the enemies pose? When you're detected, gun-toting enemies are hard to handle in multiples in combat, but manageable alone, still usually managing to take some health from you. What's odd about them though is, like their detection range, their ability to alert others is quite small, making most encounters small inconveniences even with only your sword. Axe wielders, however, are completely laughable with slow and immobile animations. The only enemy that truly feels threatening are dogs. Their detection is enhanced to also sniff your trail, their melee animations and movements are fast, and they're downright deadly in multiples. Pistol bullets actually gain value here, and since they're a limited resource, it adds tension to the player's fight or flight dynamic. Unfortunately, they only appear once the game becomes more linear and less vertical in its level design. The standard Goombas, however, are just not threatening without supportive level design. Lastly, I want to talk a bit about early access game length. This game is maximum 2 hours if you really want to play around with the mechanics, but is 30 minutes long with competent understanding. Early access doesn't have a hard definition, but this is more paid demo territory, especially with how quickly level quality degrades for how little content there is. In my verdict, the fishery shows just how strong the mechanics can be in this game when supported by non-linear level design and vertical movement options. Equally, when level design does not inspire or support dynamic traversal options, it shows how crucial it is to make this game engaging. The soul of this game is in its movement and autonomy of approach to problem solving, but the latter areas cease to have this magic. At $17.99 for what is functionally a demo of middling quality, I cannot recommend Gloomwood at release.